everyone, Mark Thompson here from the Angular team, and welcome to the Angular v16 launch event. Now, we've been hard at work adding new features for this release, and we can't wait to share everything with all of you tuning in from all over the world. Now, before we get started, we want to extend an enormous thank you to all of the Angular developers out there. Whether you're making content, contributing to the framework, commenting on RFCs, writing apps, or supporting in some other way, we just want to say a huge thank you from the bottom of our hearts and let you know that we appreciate you. So here's how it's going to work today. We'll be announcing features and speaking with various members of the team. Now, that's your chance to get your questions answered live on air. If you have a question about a feature that we just announced, put it in the chat. But, be mindful of our code of conduct. Be kind and respectful so we all can have a nice time. Now, with that being said, let's turn our attention to the new framework features that we think you're really going to love. Here we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Dylan Hun, and I'm a software engineer on the Angular framework team. Let's look at some recent Angular updates that we think will really improve your development experience. To start things off, how often do you wish that you could get router parameters as component inputs? It would be so much easier compared to having to inject a service and interact with its API, right? I'm happy to share that in v16, you can now directly receive the route data, path parameters, and query parameters for a route as component inputs. Another small quality of life improvement that we introduced in v16 is self-closing tags. These allow you to do less typing by skipping the closing tag of your custom elements in templates. Next, we had a very popular feature request asking us to enable marking inputs as required, so that when you don't set their value in a template, you can get an error. In version 16, you can take advantage of this feature today. You can specify an input as required by passing an object with required property set to true to the input decorator. A few months ago, we started porting the Angular CLI build system to ESBuild. It's a highly performant bundler implemented in Go. A missing piece to make it available in developer preview was the ngserve command. And in v16, we implemented a development server based on Vite. With this change, we're happy to announce that the ESBuild-based builder enters developer preview. We also worked on improving your experience in your text editor or IDE. The Angular language service now supports automatically importing components and pipes, both ng-module and standalone. The last feature that I want to tell you about today is the content security policy improvement we made for inline styles. Starting today, across the Angular CLI and framework, you can specify a nonce to meet the content security policy style source. For more information about this release, check goo.gle/angular-v16.
Wow, such great updates, and we really hope that you like them. But to tell us more, we have some very special guests. Please welcome Dylan Hun and Doug Parker. Dylan, Doug, welcome to the show. How are you folks doing?
It's great to be here in beautiful Sunnyvale. Yeah, really great to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm feeling great. Loving the vibe here. This is really an awesome place. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. All right, got a ton of questions for you. And then for our friends at home, remember that if you have questions, put those in the chat. So Doug, I want to start off with you because in this video, Dylan announced something really fantastic. Can you tell us what's next for the developer preview of the Vite server?
Yeah, so what we've had so far is something we've been working through for a few releases now, trying to update our build stack to use ESBuild under the hood, and now we're throwing in Vite for development serving. So ngserve now just works with Vite when you're opted into this new build stack. Things are a lot faster. We've been seeing some really great performance improvements there. One thing I do want to set some expectations with the community. A lot of people outside of Angular tend to use Vite as kind of an all-in-one build system, doing everything that they need to do for their particular app. For Angular, we're using it in a much more narrow context. We're using it specifically for a development server, and specifically using it in ngserve. So we've got some, so with now, we're able to ship this and get the performance improvements out of that. One thing we're looking forward to in the future is being able to pre-bundle dependencies so that we get even faster builds. We don't have to rebundle dependencies that are going to be the same every time you rebuild your app. Get some nice improvements there. We'll be looking forward to even better performance going on forward in the future.
And then for developers to use this, they have to opt in. This is not a change that they just get automatically. They have to opt into that.
For right now, yes, you have to opt in. There's instructions in the blog post, but it's just one little flag change is all you have to make to be able to opt in. There are a few known feature gaps that we're still working through, which is why it's still in developer preview, but we're very much excited for people to try it out. And we're hoping to graduate this to stable and eventually enable it by default sometime soon.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, I got a question for Dylan before we go to our audience questions. What type of errors will folks get with the mark input is required? I know it's a new feature. People have been wanting that for a long time. Yeah. Check our GitHub, lots of comments wanting that. So how's that going to work out for developers in practice?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is like a top issue on GitHub for a long time. For a long time, you'd see, especially authors of component libraries, they would, in their ng on init, specifically check to see if an input was present, and if it wasn't, then throw a runtime error. And sort of the big advantage of required inputs, the new required inputs API, is that this is now a static error. We catch it at compile time for you. So you can imagine, like, if you're a component library author and say you are trying to provide like a date picker widget, right? Or let's say like a schedule viewer widget, and you really want to have that date provided as an input. You can verify that it's present at compile time now. So we think this is going to be super useful for component library authors, but in general, it's something people have really been asking for, so we're very excited.
I know I've certainly written way too many components that have to assert things ng on init. It gets very boilerplatey. You have to put the non-null assertion. I always just feel dirty when I do that. I am so looking forward to being able to delete all that. Just slap required on it, get some nice compile time errors, and looking forward to it.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to throw to our audience to see if we have any questions from our audience. Remember, put your questions in the chat. All right, Chaos Monster, one of our favorite friends from our live streams. If you don't watch the gaming live stream, watch the gaming live stream. It's really awesome with Jeremy Elborn and myself. As at Angular, is the new resolver input blocking, or can it be async?
This is for the new router resolver?
I think this is for the new router resolver.
Off the top of my head, I think it's blocking, but really the right person to answer this question is actually Andrew Scott. So. Sure. If you at us on Twitter, at Angular or at Dilhan for me, we will get you pointed the right direction to answer that question.
Sure. Yeah, we'll get back to you on Twitter, so definitely add us. Let's get another question from the audience. All right, so are there plans to integrate forms and signals? Does unidirectional data flow get broken with this approach? Let's actually save this question. This is a great question, but we're going to have some engineers who work directly on signals that can answer that more. But Dylan actually worked on reactive forms. Can you give us just a little bit of a preview of that, Dylan?
Yeah, so sort of our perspective on this, and without getting too much into what we could possibly do in the future, because we certainly haven't decided anything in this direction yet. But we consider forms to be like a crucially important test case for really any framework, any reactivity system. We really want the forms experience to be amazing. And so obviously, we're talking about how do signals impact the way developers are going to write their applications. We really need to sit down and think about what that's going to do to the forms experience. So I want to emphasize we haven't made any decisions yet for exactly what direction we're going to take forms. But definitely we expect signals to impact forms in some way.
Okay. I think we got another question from the audience. All right. I'm completely new to Vite. What does Vite's history, purpose, and ultimate goal, what is the purpose and ultimate goal for Angular? So how are we going to integrate this long term? What do you foresee as how Vite can play a part of the Angular story?
Yeah, so Vite, if you're not familiar with that particular term, Vite is a sort of combination build system, development server that's been developed in open source, most notably kind of Evan You is behind it, notable for Vue contributions. And there's been a lot of momentum behind that, just a lot of some very, very good performance coming out of it, and it's really been kind of taking a lot of the web tooling by storm. And so we've been hoping to leverage that within Angular, and a lot of what the Angular CLI in particular is trying to accomplish is to sort of abstract over a lot of the tooling that's going on under the hood that a lot of developers don't necessarily want to deal with. We don't want to be messing with config files and things like that. And so one of our goals with this particular project is to be able to swap out our dev server implementation, put Vite in there, get performance improvements, get additional benefits from that, and be able to just ship that directly to users, and you don't have to change anything. You don't necessarily need to to deal with config files or awkward migrations or things like that. And that's something that we're trying to lead into over the next few versions and where we're going with it. Vite is also particularly notable for hot module replacement, which for those who might not be familiar, is sort of a method of being able to inject changes from your application without having to reload the page. So you're able to maintain state, you're able to keep looking at what you're looking at and get a really awesome edit refresh experience. That's something that we're going to be looking into a bit longer term. We want to be able to ship out what we have now, get faster builds, make things a lot better there. And then one of the next steps we're going to be looking at after that is going to see how we can improve the HMR story and how we can make your edit refresh experience even better than it is today.
So before we go to our next audience question, that is a great point that I'd love for us to highlight just a little bit about the HMR story. So right now, Angular does support HMR, but the support isn't as robust as we'd like.
Right.
But with Vite being a part of where we're doing the developer preview, so it sounds like that's something that we'll spend some time investigating to see how we can improve that story for the hot module replacement and the edit refresh cycle.
Right, that is something we do want to explore in the future. It is important to recognize that Vite adds a bunch of awesome tooling and functionality to make this a really great experience and make it really fast. But ultimately, a lot of the current challenges with HMR have to do with how the framework itself is designed and being able to actually accept changes and replace your styles at runtime and update templates, which can be quite involved. So there's still a lot of work to be done there, and that's something that we're interested in exploring in the future. Vite will help, but not totally solve that problem. So there's a lot more work to be done there in the future.
All right, I think we got time for one more question. Is Vite enabled by default, or do we need to do something to enjoy it? So I can actually answer this one because I am also a genius on the couch. So you're going to have to do a configuration change. Angular.json, update there to enable it. We have details in the blog post that we just released, so definitely check out the blog post. And we'll put that in the chat so you can know where the blog post is so you can get the answers that you're looking for. All right, I want to say thanks to Doug and Dylan. I'm just hearing from offstage. We have one more question. Let's go do one more audience question. All right, I was super excited for Vite and ESBuild, but unfortunately, I require the localization to be supported. Any insights on the roadmap for 16.2?
Yes, internationalization is probably the biggest feature gap that we have right now. That is probably the next big thing we're going to be shipping with this ESBuild implementation. So definitely stay tuned. I don't want to commit to any specific release because these things are always a little bit flexible, but it is definitely something we're going to be doing and something that we'll need to get in before we mark this stable. So definitely something to try out, even just for your default builds that aren't internationalization. Play with it today. See what those performance improvements are going to be, and then as we start landing in those last few features to shore up that compatibility, that's when we can fully mark this stable and just enable it by default for everybody.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, tell the audience one feature that you want them to try out from the v16 release.
Yeah, so I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit here. I've been working for a while on automatic imports in the language service. So if you're using VS Code and you have our extension installed, or if you've installed our language service extension in another editor of your choice, and you're importing a component, especially a standalone component, from elsewhere in your application, try mousing over it, click Quick Fix, and see if it generates the import for you.
All right, Doug, 5 seconds to give us one feature.
Yeah, that's a great one to start with, I'll say up front. One other thing I'll point out is that we are adding experimental jest support right now, just to try to explore new unit testing options, and that's something the community's been asking for a long time. Still very early right now, but something we're going to be continuing to push on in the future, and so I'm really excited to see where that's going to be going.
All right, so you heard it here, folks. Definitely try out the new features in the Angular language service and try out that jest support. So big thanks to Doug and Dylan, great work. And as a reminder, continue to put those questions in the chat so we can answer them live with the team. Okay. We know that you love standalone APIs, and we love giving you updates. Let's find out more in this clip from our very own Minko Getchev.
Hi everyone, I'm Minko from the Angular team, and I'm here to share the latest on standalone APIs. Back in 2022, we announced our plans to introduce a set of standalone APIs that would improve developer ergonomics, reduce the amount of boilerplate, and move Angular development forward. Since then, we've heard from the community that you all love the improved developer experience. We're thrilled to have unlocked so much potential. for Angular features. In this video, I'll share with you everything about the improvements in the routing APIs we introduced in version 15 and all the tooling that we landed in version 16. Before the introduction of standalone APIs, lazy loading routes was a multi-step process, which relied on modules. Consider this example. We have a child module which declares the items route. In the routes array, we use the load children syntax to import the items module which contains the corresponding routes. This seems like too much code and too much work to lazy load routes, and well, we agree. Let's check out the new and improved lazy loading syntax in version 15. With standalone APIs, we can simply declare an array of routes and use load children with a dynamic import to lazily load the child routes. Later, we can pass the routes array to provide router or just export it if these are child routes. That's it. No more modules. No for child. That's just way less complexity, and it is way more immediately clear what this code does. There's actually one more feature that we would like to highlight. Check this out. Remember, there was no direct way to lazy load components. The only way to achieve this was through load children. Well, thanks to standalone APIs, we can now dynamically lazy load a component by using the loads component property on the route definition. In this example, the items component is lazy loaded and the code is much clearer. You can learn more about the improved router APIs on goo.gle/angular-standalone-routing. So what's new for the standalone APIs in version 16? We made improvements to the tooling story. Now developers can create apps bootstrapped with the new standalone APIs using the standalone flag with ng-new. With this change, you will no longer need to manually convert your applications after creating them. Alright, but what about our existing apps? Great question. We have something for you too. We're also announcing new schematics that will allow teams to migrate their applications from ng-module-based to standalone APIs. By running ng-generate at angular/core :standalone. The schematics will guide you through options to convert your components, directives, and pipes to use standalone APIs. It will also assist you through removing unnecessary ng modules and even converting your app to Bootstrap using standalone APIs. You can even choose to migrate specific parts of your application by specifying a path to the migration tool. To get started, check out the migration guide at angular.io/guide/standalone-migration. You can use this tooling today to start taking advantage of all that standalone APIs have to offer.
All right, friends, welcome back. Standalone APIs keep getting better and better. And here to tell us more from the Angular team, Alex Rickabaugh. Alex, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so good to have you. I got a question for you right out the gate. We want to get started. And then I've already been told that the audience has a ton of questions. So we want to get going.
Let's get into it.
But first, the migration story for standalone components has been on everyone's mind for a while. Please let us know what's the best way from your point of view for a team to migrate.
Absolutely. So I think right off the bat, if you're starting to think about using standalone components in your application, you should start authoring new standalone components. Don't necessarily jump into the migration if you haven't used them before, if you're not sure how they work. Get familiar with them, try them out in a couple of cases, and when you feel comfortable with the APIs, that's when you want to start running the migration schematic. And if you have a big application, take it slow. Migrate a part at a time. As Minko mentioned, you can migrate a specific path. And then when you're ready to say, okay, I'm comfortable with this, it seems to be working, then you can use the kind of options that were shown at the beginning to migrate the whole application, kind of the rest of the application to standalone.
I love that advice for people to start using standalone APIs. Get used to them, start to make sure they fit your use case. I mean, there's still going to be a great way to go to develop a component.
Yeah.
Always a good way to go. But I think not having any experience, because it changes the way that you write your code a little bit, because you're removing the need for those modules. Yeah, so that's a really good tip. I think the community is going to really benefit from that. All right, speaking of community, let's go straight to a question. I know you folks have a bunch of questions, so let's get started. All right, so will it be possible to lazy load components without defining them in the router?
Without defining them in the router, yeah, you can lazy load standalone components today. JavaScript has ES6 dynamic import, which is the import that you call as a function. And today you can do that in Angular with a standalone component, pass it to view_container_ref, and render it dynamically. No router needed.
Ooh, that sounds fancy, Alex. I feel like, okay, so I love that description of what to do. I think you and I should do a video or something to let people see how to do that in practice. I think some of these cool practices around standalone components, there's some opportunities there. We should do more of that.
Let's do it.
And if you want to see us do more of that, let us know what type of videos you want us to see. If you want to see Alex on the streams more, want to see other people, let's definitely do that. Speaking of, let's get involved with more questions. Now, if I import a module into some component which are used in a parent component, is the module imported many times in the parent component, or is there some caching involved under the hood?
There's not necessarily caching, but deduplication. So ng modules serve two roles. They kind of communicate which components and directives are available in templates, and they configure dependency injection. And that's one of the things that makes new developers kind of a little more confused when they're working with ng modules, because they're actually doing these two kind of separate but somewhat related jobs. And so when you import an ng module into a standalone component, from the dependency injection side, it's deduplicated into the application injector. So it only is referenced once. From a template side, it's compiled away by the compiler.
Fantastic. I had a question for you, actually. What's next for standalone APIs?
What's next for standalone APIs? So v16 has ng-new-standalone. You can start using standalone in an application. One of the things we're doing right now is working with our community to make sure that ng-add, when you're adding a new library like ngrx to Angular, works with standalone applications and standalone APIs. So once we kind of get that piece in place, then we'll start to visit, like, should standalone actually be the default experience for a new Angular application?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that for some developers, doing the ng-add requires a little bit of a workaround that you have to do manually, and we just want to smooth all those sharp edges off.
Yeah, the key is you can use standalone in components and directives, but it's migrating your bootstrap to standalone that has a little bit of problems with ng-add, because obviously community libraries were written before this existed.
Right.
They're not looking for that bootstrap application call. They're looking for an app module.
Right.
So we're working with them to make sure their schematics are compatible.
Oh, fantastic. I think we have time for one more question from the community. All right, can I combine load component with load children to lazy load module and lazy load components?
Yes, you can do that. So load children loads routes, right? It loads child routes of the current route. Load component will load the component that's being shown kind of for that prefix. And so if your load component has a router outlet in it, it will respect the load children and also lazy load the child routes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We like to take care of people, it sounds like. When we do things, we really design the APIs to really make the developer life easy.
Yeah, a lot of thought and kind of effort goes into making sure that we have a clear, consistent story for how these APIs work.
That's right. And I think we're going to talk more about that later on for the fireside chat with you and Matt Liner. So definitely people want to stick around for that. And so friends, if you want to see more of Alex, stick around to the stream. Alex will be back to talk about more features, especially one that I know people have been thinking about. So you definitely want to stay tuned. Thank you, Alex, for coming out. It's so great to have you. Now, again, we'll be hanging out with Alex a lot more today. But up next, we've heard that some of you have dry components. And we want to make sure that you know about the future of server-side rendering and hydration in Angular. So you want it, you got it. Take it away, Jessica.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Janik from the Angular team, and I'm here with some very exciting news about the future of Angular's server-side technology plans. Up till this point, Angular applications that rely on server-side rendering have faced a major challenge: hydration. We've used a solution called destructive hydration, which means that the app is rendered on the server side and then re-rendered from scratch again in the browser. Not ideal, right? Of course, there has to be a better way. And we think so too. The team and I have been working on implementing a non-destructive hydration technique for server-side rendering in Angular. Now, Angular apps using SSR will support full hydration. meaning that the apps will be rendered on the server side, sent to the browser, and Angular will try to match and reuse as much of your app structure as it can instead of re-rendering it like before. Applications will have improved core web vitals and be able to take advantage of all the benefits of server-side rendered applications. Oh, and I have something even more excellent to share with you. I'm pleased to announce that the first developer preview of this feature is available now in the latest release, Angular v16. That's right, developers can update their apps and start experimenting with this feature. Since this is a developer preview, you can expect APIs to still be changed as well as various implementation improvements as we continue to build out the remaining features. Here's a sneak peek at what's on the horizon. We'll be working on stabilizing the APIs, working on support for internationalization, and exploring fancy features like more granular hydration. We're so excited about this new update and can't wait to hear what you think and see the great apps you'll build. Live long and prosper, and stay hydrated, friends.
All right, I have a question for you. Would you call that a wave of innovation? All right, I know, dad jokes for the win. All right, so to tell us more about the new hydration features, please welcome Jessica Janik and Andrew Kushner from the Angular team. Jessica, Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you folks doing today?
Doing great. How are you doing, Mark?
Oh, I'm so good, so good.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's so good to have you. Listen, the people are so excited. If you have questions for Andrew and Jessica, please put them in the chat. This is your time to speak with the great folks who worked on this great feature. All right, here's my question to start off for you folks. We've already had server-side rendering with Angular Universal. How is what we're doing now with hydration different?
So Angular Universal is kind of a separate project that was brought into the Angular ecosystem. It was originally created by a community member. And hydration is something that's part of the core of the framework. And they kind of work in conjunction. So you have your server-side rendering that's handled by Universal. And then the core of the framework does all this annotation work to make it so that it can be reused on the client side.
All right, fantastic.
Yep.
Question for you, Andrew. So working on this, what were some of the challenges that the team had to overcome figuring out how to implement hydration for Angular?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the previous method of rendering the application after server-side rendering was not very optimal, and it allowed some different patterns. And our goal was to find the right balance between supporting some of the patterns, but also to make sure that we set up the framework for success and for extensibility in the future to deliver more features. So finding that balance in every decision was, I think, the key challenge.
So early on, I remember talking with you folks about what your vision was for hydration in general and how you wanted to work with the other community members and other projects in the space. Can you just speak a little bit about what the implementation means for them as well?
So we definitely did work with like other community members and volunteers that wanted to help test the framework and the new hydration changes along with us so that we could make sure that we didn't break anybody along the way and that we were able to catch some of those issues earlier on. That was a big help for us in actually getting to the developer preview point. Without that help, we would not have been able to really deliver it and have it be successful.
Yeah, and also one point that I want to make is that we also learned a lot from the people that we worked with, and huge thanks to everyone who participated. And what we learned also is that the migration or like the enabling of hydration may not be like one step, but it can be made incremental. So we provided a way to adopt the hydration incrementally for applications. So if there are some components that are not fully compatible, there's still a way to enable hydration for the whole application and just opt out those particular components. So this is also was a feature that we delivered based on the feedback. So yeah,
Oh, fantastic. All right, we got to go to some questions from the audience. They are burning up with questions. All right, so there is the new hydration. Is this just for SSR or this work also on the client? Because this person's saying they don't know as much about hydration. So where does this fit in their developer story right now?
So this is not just SSR, but it works in conjunction with SSR. So you have an application that you are server-side rendering, and what hydration essentially is once that server-side rendered application is serialized and passed down to the client, the browser picks up, and then Angular kicks in. And hydration is actually like Angular reattaching and reusing all of the DOM structure that's there, rather than what we did before, which is to kind of wipe away what's there and re-render after the application has been fetched. So the answer is that they're used together. It's both server and client together.
Oh, fantastic. And I love the idea of reuse. All right, I got another question. So what happens to the not rendered part of the server, or on the server, which should be on the browser?
So I can maybe answer that. So if I understand correctly, the question is it possible to render only components on the client, but not server-side render them? And I think, yeah, we have this flag that I mentioned, the skip hydration flag. So with that flag, it's possible to recreate the component on the client. And if there are some use cases or missing capabilities, we would love to see the feature request with some information, and we'll be able to respond and think about it and collect more information and provide the feature if that becomes useful.
Fantastic. Question for both of you. What's next for hydration? Where are we going?
Well, there's a lot coming up in the future. As far as like server-side rendering and hydration is concerned, we're going to be exploring concepts around like partial spaces where we could potentially have sections of the page that are left dehydrated until we want them to be hydrated. So we're going to research that a bit. We're also looking at like lazy loading as more of a like fine-grained lazy loading built into the framework. That's something we're also going to be researching. And these things will probably work in conjunction together, but we have a lot of like research to do on it before we can make any promises. But we're very excited about the potential of what that brings.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to mention is that the architecture that we put in place would allow us to do this research. And actually, we did some research during the initial phase of the exploration. So we do have some interesting experiments, but we, as Jessica mentioned, we want to do a little bit more research, make sure that we deliver the best solution possible with the best quality possible. So yeah, you'll hear more from us within the next few months.
And I'll add that, of course, we also want to exit developer preview, so we want to make sure it's stable for you all.
Mm-hmm. All right, more questions from the community. Someone says they're waiting for the next pun from Jessica.
Well, I mean, there's a pool of them I can pick from. We've got all this talk about hydration. What can I say?
All right, well, let's get one more question. One more question for the community. All right. Well, actually, we're out of time for questions, but we'll come back to more questions. And listen, if your question didn't get answered during this, be sure to tag us on Twitter, and then we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Jessica's also a person who comes on the stream. Maybe we'll have Jessica and Andrew come on, and we'll do a whole segment dedicated to hydration. So big thank you to Jessica and Andrew for stopping by. Thank you so much. All right, friends, this is your signal to put your questions in the chat, because we're about to learn all about Angular's new reactivity model, Angular Signals. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Emma, a Senior Developer Relations Engineer on the Angular team. Today, I'm here to share some fantastic news about Angular and the future of change detection. Change detection is how Angular updates the UI in the browser when the state in the app changes. This could be from user interaction, or maybe some new data is available. Making something happen when there's a change is called reactivity. Angular's reactivity today runs change detection all over your whole application. But what if we were to rethink reactivity in Angular? Well, that's exactly what we've been doing. Before we move on, let's discuss reactivity. So what is reactivity? What if Angular knew more about which state in your application was changing and when it changed? Even better, what if your state could tell Angular itself where it's used and when it changes, so Angular could automatically update whatever depends on that value? With this level of fine-grained control, we believe that application developers can build scalable, performant applications while taking advantage of the features and tooling they love from Angular. With these goals in mind, we found a solution that we think developers and their teams will love. Introducing Angular Signals. You might have come across information about our plans to update Angular to use signals. So we have another surprise for you. Angular Signals are in developer preview in version 16 today. We cannot wait for you to try them out. To help you get started, let's cover a few of the foundational concepts together. Signals have 3 core concepts that we call reactive primitives: signal, computed, and effect. A signal is like a variable and holds a value that can change. Unlike variables, signals can notify Angular when they change. A computed is a kind of signal that calculates its value from other signals and only updates if the values it depends on change. Then we have effects. Effects are functions that execute when the values of the signals they use change, giving developers the opportunity to respond to those changes in a meaningful way. All right, now that we have the fundamental concepts covered, the next step is for you to get started and try it yourselves. Once you do, we want to know what you think. You can get started by heading to goo.gle/angular-signals. All right, that's it for me, and for you, that's your signal to ng update. Bye.
Okay, can I be honest? This is one of my favorite Angular features yet, and I love that the community is so excited about it. Now, I've already been told that you put your signal questions in the chat, so we're definitely going to answer them live. Joining me on the couch are Alex and Emma from the Angular team, and welcome, friends. Welcome back,
Mark.
Alex. Again, Emma, good to see you. As always, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. You know what? It's so good to be with everybody, especially being a distributed team and get to spend time with people face to face. It's just so good. All right, we're not gonna get to any of my questions because the people have already lit up the chat with signals questions, so we're just gonna jump right in. All right, jumping right into the community questions. In terms of performance, is there a net advantage of using only signals instead of the regular way, the change detection that we're used to?
So in v16, signals will drive on-push components in the same way that observables can with the async pipe. And that means that you can use signals to get the same performance benefits that you do if you make your components on-push and use observables. In the future, we will have kind of what we're calling per-component change detection or granular change detection. And that means that whenever a signal component becomes dirty, whenever a signal notifies that component that it's updated, the component needs to refresh itself with the UI, only that component can be refreshed, and the rest of the application won't have to be. So you'll get some performance benefits from that as well.
Right, because Emma, this is just a developer preview at this point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton more in the API that still has to come. The RFCs do a really good job of outlining, especially some of the performance-based optimizations on like a component lifecycle basis, but also things like interacting with observables, things like that.
Fantastic. You mentioned the RFC. We had a massive RFC, 5 documents that we put out there. Did we have any key learnings that we could talk about from the RFC?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually an entire 6th RFC that just summarizes all of the learnings from the previous 5. But I think my favorite learning was actually some of the updates we made to the RFCs while they were still open. So things like I mentioned, that interoperability layer, where we originally had from observable and we changed that to signal. So changing some of the semantics and how developers will actually interact with these APIs. Alex, do you have other learnings maybe?
Yeah, even the team couldn't keep straight what from observable meant. So the community suggested that, and we were like, yes, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. We also changed how the lifecycle hooks were going to work. So when we were looking at signal components, we realized that we were going to be removing a number of the lifecycle hooks that just didn't make sense for signals. You don't need ng on changes when you have signals telling you, hey, I'm changing. And so as part of that, we thought maybe we revisit how lifecycle hooks work, and we have this after init thing in a constructor. And we got a very clear signal from the community that this was not an API design that they liked. And so we said, you know what? We don't have to do that. Let's walk it back.
All right.
So we updated the RFC to say, nope, it's going to be ng on init.
There we go. Got a comment from the community? All right, so this one's actually a question. Does the Angular signals mean that all reactive data that we want to be rendered to the DOM have to be provided in signals instead of saving it in traditional variables? This is a really good distinction to make.
Yeah.
Help us explain.
That's a great question. It depends. So if you are still using Zone.js in your applications, you will still be able to have zone components, and they can bind to state that is just in services and plain variables. If you want to use the new zoneless change detection that will be coming in a future version, you will need to communicate to Angular when that state changes using signals. It doesn't mean that every individual piece of information has to be in its own signal. You could very easily build an application that just has one signal of your entire state, and for many small applications, that will suffice. It's kind of up to you at what level of granularity you want to be able to change things in order to optimize which components need to update on any given change.
Yeah, I might be reading this question wrong, and I'm sure Dennis can also add this in the chat, but I also think that signals allow you to pick out what will change and what will be updated, what will be computed, things like that. But there's a lot of variables in your app that maybe won't change. And so by having a more granular, fine-grained reactivity model, if the variable isn't going to be updated, then it absolutely doesn't need to be a signal. It can just be a variable, and it can be static. So making a differentiation of what is static in your app and render it on the DOM.
That's a great point.
But then that gives us the fine grain because we get to choose now versus just having variables that are in the zone, and then when we bind them to the template, just everything there is kind of subject to change detection.
Yes.
Right. All right, another question from the community. All right, can signals be used outside the component, like in a service or a guard? Good question.
Great question, and absolutely, you can put them anywhere.
Because they're just a part of the framework moving forward. Wow. Well, so just to clarify for the people, they're part of the framework, but they're not only used for change detection anymore. Or not anymore, but just used for change detection.
Yeah, signals are how you communicate to Angular that your state, that the state you want to show in your UI is changing. And that state can still, like in Angular today, it can still live anywhere. You can put that state in services, you can put it inside of components or directives, you can put that state in global variables if that's your thing. It doesn't matter, as long as you bind in a component to a signal, Angular will be able to know that that component needs to update when that signal changes.
So you're telling me I can have a signal that I change in the service and it can communicate across the lines of a component?
Yes, or many components.
What?
Yeah.
I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just saying that's like fantastic. That's such a fantastic feature. I think we got time for one more question. All right. So how do you plan to help migrate legacy Zone.js libraries and applications to full signal-based component applications?
Ooh, that's a great question. Migration is something that we have not spent a lot of time looking at yet. It is very challenging to migrate something as deeply ingrained in an application as the reactivity model. Migrating from zones, where Angular stands for years, was we know nothing about where your state is or when it updates. In some cases, we can very clearly say, oh, you're assigning to this field here. We can maybe in an automatic migration turn that into a signal. In other cases, when you have state that's off in services and injected in various places throughout the application, it's a bit more challenging to do that automatically. So we are looking at, can we have tools that maybe don't get it 100% right, but do the hard work for you, do the boilerplatey things for you, and then show you the code afterwards and essentially ask, like, hey, is this what your application was trying to do? Can we have like a human-assisted migration rather than an automatic migration?
Fantastic.
Yeah, that said, I think even before the RFC, when this was still in design phase, we did work with a lot of state management library authors and library authors and owners who we know will want to provide a signal-based alternative or additional operability in their library. And so we've been working with them from the start, basically, to make sure that we have operability in mind, that we have, there's already RFCs on some of your favorite state management libraries on how they will integrate signals. So that's not to say all Zone.js legacy applications like we have answers for right now, but we at least have already started work with making sure that your common third-party libraries have solutions for this.
And that's a good point too. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time working on this feature. I hope people like it, and I hope it's a good enough experience that you want to migrate. But you will not have to.
Yeah.
We're not removing Zone.js, right? Zone components will be supported. I think the language we used in the RFC was for the foreseeable future, which means that there is, unless something changes in the ecosystem, we don't see removing zone support at all.
Fantastic.
So you will not need to migrate zone components, but I hope you want to.
Hope you want to. And remember, these are early days yet with zones. Sorry, with zones. Long days with zones, but early days with signals. And the RFCs let you know that we're still trying to decide what's the best way to move forward and what we're going to do next. So we got time, all right? We got time. We're still making decisions together. And again, together, as Emma mentioned, we're talking to library authors. We're working with people who use Angular as a part of their story. So this is something that is going over time. Speaking of time, our time is up together right now. But thank you so much to Emma and Alex for spending some time with us talking about signals. Now, right now, I'd love to just hear some audience comments to see what the streets are saying about this. Oh, listen, Marcus, thank you so much for sending the love out there. Marcus and I share a strong bond, having a very similar name, so that's pretty fantastic. NG16 is the most amazing release ever. The team hears that type of feedback, and it just energizes us, and it lets us know that we're doing the right work, which is so encouraging. So we really, really appreciate that. And then let's do one more comment. Signal, 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 signal. Signal, signal. That's right. Right. Mm-hmm. All right. And okay, one more. Marcus came back with another comment. Happy Angular 16, everyone. And that goes out to the entire community. Happy Angular version 16. All right, so let's change it up a bit, shall we? The Angular team has been shipping features left and right. And people have been wondering, well, what's next? Well, you're in luck. To help us understand what's next for Angular and more, please welcome our engineering manager, Madlina, and Alex once again. Alex has been on the show as much as I have, so that's pretty fantastic.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, welcome back, Madlina. Thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Glad to have you.
It's exciting to be here.
It is exciting. So many questions. So I want to encourage the audience that as we're spending time with them right now, put your questions in the chat. This is a great time to get questions answered that you'll get to hear from our leadership, and you'll get some really, really good answers from this. Very excited. All right, I'm going to open up. Now, we had talked about hydration and signals, all right? How did the Angular team figure out that these two features out of everything that we could have been doing? How do we land on these two features as our big things for 2023?
It's a good question, and it's one we get asked a lot. It is also one that we've been talking about in various forums. You'll hear a little bit more at I/O. You've heard about it maybe at NGConf for other places as well. At the heart of it, it comes down to the fact that we are a data-driven team. And so we want to look at the data from the developers in various forms, whether or not that's comments, your bug reports, issue reports, RFC comments, all of those places, but most importantly, actually our annual survey that we run. And last year we got over 10,000 responses, which is an amazing amount of data for us to be able to understand what is working, and probably more importantly, what is not working, because that's usually where we then need to spend our time. And that's how we've sort of gotten into this area. And in particular, beyond, like one of them with hydration, it was very much the fact that we heard that server-side rendering needs some love, and we need to spend a little bit more time making it better. With reactivity, it came from a little bit of a different place, partially looking at issues and all of those places, but also the fact that we knew we had to look at developer experience a little bit more. And one of those avenues was the fact that, there are places where you needed to understand how Angular worked in order to get your effects that you wanted in your app. And that is not a great experience. That's not how a framework is meant to work. And what we've internally been calling that is sharp edges. And so it's been really important for us to understand how do we remove those and understand at a conceptual and deep level how we remove them, not just the surface of it. And that's how we ended up going into signals. And Alex can talk a little bit more maybe about the process there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this really came out of, it's one interesting observation, right, is it's been nearly 10 years since AngularJS was released. And a couple years ago, we came together as a team, kind of for the first time after lockdown. We're able to be in the same room together, and had a bit of a deeper discussion about kind of looking back on that time. And we realized kind of two really critical things. One is that the web had changed a lot. You know, we said goodbye to some loved and not so loved browsers. New browsers introduced all kinds of new APIs. The JavaScript language has really been evolving quite a bit since the ECMAScript 5 days. And the second thing we realized was that Angular had actually changed a bit in that time frame.
Right.
You know, we've kind of been on a journey as well. And it seemed like an opportune moment to look back and look at some of the original design assumptions that were made, some of the trade-offs that were put into the design of Angular, and ask ourselves whether those trade-offs were still the right ones to make 7 to 10 years later, right? And would they support us for the next 10 years of Angular development? And we started looking at things like change detection, server-side rendering as well. But for change detection specifically, we noticed that, hey, a lot of the times as developers scale up their applications, that they run into these problems, that they start needing to understand more about how the framework is working internally, as Madlena mentioned. Really, if you peel back all the layers of APIs, you see kind of Zone.js is at the root of this problem. Zone.js is doing its job, but as it's not scaling in the developer experience in the way that we would like to see it doing. And so we started asking ourselves, hey, is it time to consider an alternative? Is there a core that we can put in there in place of Zone.js that will support Angular for the next 10 years of development, that will smooth over these sharp edges and make it so that developers can focus on shipping their features and not necessarily fine-tuning their performance in the way they had to do before?
I think what's really valuable is a couple of things that you mentioned, especially about thinking about 10 years of the next 10 years. I think one of the things that's really hard for a framework, especially in this space, is they come, they rise, and then they kind of fade away into obscurity. And then if you're an organization, you've put a lot of time into those frameworks and adopting. And then if the framework loses support, you have this rework that you have to do. So I think the audience and the community is really going to be happy to hear that we're thinking about what is the next 10 years looking like, especially if you've recently adopted Angular at your organization. You want to know that we're committed to this thing.
And we
are. Right, and we are. Let's go to some audience questions or comments. I guess we got both. Okay, so what I would like to know is, how can developers contribute to the code for example, input or output or pipes for Angular itself? The source code looks overwhelming. Are there any tutorials for such a thing? This is a really good question. What's the best way to contribute? How can they get started?
That's a fantastic question. So on our issue tracker, we have labels for the issues. And there's two labels I think that are relevant here, which is good first issue and help wanted. These are issues that we've kind of singled out in triage as, hey, someone who really doesn't know too much about the internals of Angular can come in here and start to maybe get their feet wet working in our code base. Definitely reach out to us. If you're interested in working on an issue, ping us on the issue and ask, hey, can I take this on? Can someone help me understand what needs to happen here? And if it's, there are many areas of the framework where we don't have the bandwidth to focus on right now.
Sure.
We're working on reactivity and hydration at the moment, right? We're not necessarily doing deep work in the animations package today. But if it's something that fits in with our plans, if we have the bandwidth to kind of engage with you and help you understand what needs to happen there, we will do that.
Okay.
I definitely want to emphasize, start
Sure.
small.
Yeah.
Right, like things are overwhelming if you haven't had a chance to get to learn it. And so this is why we've done the work of singling out issues as being good places to start needing help, because those are places where you can start getting to learn the code base as well. And so while it might not be the thing that you might want to work on first, or the first thing that brought you to want to look at the code, it does allow you to get to know the code as well. And so then the second issue will be easier, and the third one even easier from there, and so on and so on and so forth. So think in small steps here too, but if it feels overwhelming, that's what I do when I get to encounter a new code base I've never met with. It's not like I try and understand everything at once. I try and learn a little bit and start solving small bugs, because that's the way I get to know the code as well. And so we recommend the same way for Angular as well.
And that works even internally, even for myself. I just pushed a new tutorial to the Angular documentation, and it was one thing that amazed me is how great the folks who are managing their repo, how supportive they are, even for internal, external people. So friends, if you're out there and you want to contribute, we're very supportive. We welcome the support from you as in your contribution, and we're really, really happy. So let's jump into another question. I'm new in front-end development. I learned HTML and CSS, and I'm at the end of JavaScript. Do you advise me to start to learn Angular, and why?
Definitely. I think there is no reason. You've got all the prerequisites to get started going now. And Mark just released an amazing new tutorial, which I know I haven't had a chance to fully read all and go through it myself, all of the steps yet, but that is a great way to get to know Angular in there as well. And we do assume some amount of knowledge of HTML and JavaScript, but it sounds like you've got all the prerequisites for that. So definitely get started. And Angular will scale with you. And that's why we think it is such a great framework for you. And if you want to get to learn how to work with a framework that will scale as you work on larger apps, as you might build your own app out and get more people to contribute, or you might want to work with others on a larger app, Angular will stay with you and grow with you. And that's why it is such what we believe at the heart of what makes Angular so great is it helps you go from the small to the big as well. And so get started with it.
Right.
Start with it small, but then let it help you grow and help you grow your apps to larger and larger scales.
And I think that just kind of transcends anything when you're learning. Yep. Just try. So if you want to, the best way to get started is to start.
Yep.
And so definitely want to encourage you, just get started. I think you're going to be great. Definitely do the new tutorial. It was designed with beginners in mind, and you don't have to dive into the deep end just yet. So many questions from the community. Let's keep going. More community questions. Okay, so is there a possibility of Angular compilation support to single file? Ooh. Brandon Roberts, I know you first time. I know you.
We know you.
Yeah. So single file compilation with tools like Vite. Is there anything on our roadmap, anything we're thinking about? Kind of where are we with that?
Yes. Single file compilation is a goal of Angular in the future. This is something we want to have.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but not everyone may know what that even means.
Yes.
What is single file compilation?
So today, to compile your Angular code, right? Let's say you have your component in let's call it like component module, and you have your component file. Mm-hmm. Angular needs both of these things to be able to compile your application, to be able to compile that component. And it's more than that. It actually, if you're importing common module, it needs the definition for common module to do that, which means compilation kind of has to happen as this waterfall process where you compile the library and then you compile the application on top of the library. And you have to compile all of the files kind of sequentially. Single file compilation means that you can take the source code for one file, not knowing anything else about your application, and produce compiled output for that file. And that's nice because you can parallelize it. Right. So you can have builds that take advantage of multi-core processors and run, compile 15 files simultaneously. So
yes, it is on our roadmap.
Right.
But we don't quite know yet when we're going to get around to it because we have a lot of other grand plans at the moment. And so we want to make sure we do each of those well. And so as much as we'd love to do everything, we want to make sure that we also are conscious of what makes sense and to finish the work we've started and not start a little bit here, start a little bit there, start a little bit there, and then not finish any of them. And so that's why it's a little harder for us to predict when we'll get to it, but it's definitely a topic that has come up and we definitely want to get around to it.
Sure.
The approach we've taken there is there are some fundamental assumptions that we make in Angular about how things work, like ng modules, that are naturally incompatible with single file compilation. Mm-hmm. So the approach we've taken is as we design these pieces, as we consider do we need ng modules or do we do standalone? Single file compilation is a part of that consideration. So we are taking steps towards it without necessarily a kind of overarching effort to do it with priority. So standalone is a great example of that. Standalone components take us a step closer to single file compilation.
Fantastic. I want to touch on something that Lina brought up about the importance of us picking projects and completing them. What learnings can you draw from or share with the community that led to our stance on it to be sure that that's kind of a focus for us moving forward?
I guess for me personally, it wasn't, I don't think that it's just an Angular specific thing. I think it's a good software engineering practice in general. We've probably all encountered a project where we got 80% or we got 90% and it's not quite done and we were frustrated of like, wait, what do you mean I can't use it in this context yet or not? And so I think that is actually as much as anything else that has led to that is we've ourselves, as we use things both internally and externally, as we've done our own practices, as we've been software developers ourselves. We know what it is like when someone doesn't fully finish it. And so that's why it is so important for that. It also has a second benefit, which is it actually reduces the maintenance burden on us. As long as we have multiple versions of things floating around, multiple features of the same kind, multiple APIs that do similar things, anytime we want to touch any of that, we're going to have to do both of those. And so when we do something like signals, we have to look at everything within Angular. And so if we still had a number of versions back or a number of things left over, we'd have to also consider it for them. Whether or not they're fully used or not, we still have to consider it. And so that's the other reason why it's so important for us to finish projects as well, as to make sure it keeps us in a better state moving forward with other good things that we can then bring with new features.
Fantastic. Let's get another community question. Could you say something about the status of micro front-end architecture research? How's that going?
Oh, that's a good one. Minko is the one who's been leading this.
Yeah.
He's been talking to a lot of the different teams on this to understand what's out there, what isn't. He is still compiling the research and will publish it. We've been working on the report on that. I think what we've learned is that there's a lot of different versions out there, but also that there isn't a consensus yet on where it might go. Right. And for us, it is important whatever path we pick. If we build something into the into Angular itself, we always want to make sure it is a thing we can support for the long term. And so that's why we're doing a very careful approach here on what to do and what not to do. The other thing I'll always caution with these things is that it's, having gone through various migrations in this nature as well, it's easy to, technology is often not the silver bullet for a lot of things that go on in an application. And so micro front-end solves some problems, but it doesn't solve everything you might have going on. I've actually seen some where you end up with very large nodes in the micro front-end because you didn't do the job of actually finishing modularizing your app, right? And so there's a lot as well, like if you're thinking about micro front-ends, make sure you also think about what are you trying to solve and what are all the ways you're going to have to prepare yourself for that and where are you trying to go with that. And so it is often a little bit not, and something we're spending more time on, and actually the signals RFC, pre-RFC, and also what Alex was talking about, the recollection of what we design decisions is a large part of this, is requirement gathering is a really important part of processes for when we do things. You have to understand what you want to solve and what your actual problems are before you come up with a solution. And I think sometimes it's so easy to go like, ooh, that sounds fancy, maybe that will help, but make sure you actually understand what you're trying to solve with it. So.
And what new problems you're going to get.
Yes,
with it.
actually, that's a really good one. We've talked a lot with, I remember a lot of conversations on signals as well was like, can we predict what problems we're introducing? We know which ones we're solving. Right. Do we know what new ones are going to come up instead? And I think that's really important there. But back to the original question. Yeah, we're working on it and we'll publish it in the near future.
Sure, coming soon. All right, well, soon as in when we finish it.
Yes.
That's when we say soon on the Angular team, that's what we mean when it's done.
Yeah.
We really don't try to predict things based on like a calendar. We try to predict them when they're done. So now when we do the next stream, you guys ask us what's happening, we can tell you now. Soon means when it's done. Yeah. All right, let's get another question from the community. Should we expect rendering model of Angular to have core changes driving from the introduction signals?
Ooh, that depends what you mean by rendering model. The reactivity model, certainly, right? We're introducing a new one with signals. We're not planning any changes to how rendering works directly.
We just finished that with Ivy.
Yes, yeah. And actually, Ivy is one of the things that enables us to do this because we have an extensible architecture now. So we can introduce things like signal components and not add additional code to zone applications that aren't using it yet. But we're not planning on any major changes to how templates are created just yet. There's some interesting ideas that we're benchmarking and playing around with there, but that's kind of projects down the line.
We'll also probably want to see how signals actually end up working out in applications. We know how we've seen in our own explorations of this, but it's always interesting to see what happens when you start scaling this up to very large apps, and that's very hard for us to do fully in their exploration phases. And there's always good to see when it works in practice, right? It's very, as we say, we know what we're removing, we don't know what we're introducing as maybe new issues, and that will then help influence me when we want to take a look at whether or not we need to change on rendering anything. We'll want to be in a state where we understand what the current system is fully. And so if we're working on signals right now, we'll want to make sure it has landed enough and we've seen enough how it works in actual applications to understand what it does before we then make another change on top. Because otherwise could be easily cascading without really fully understanding how it all comes together.
All right. So we're running a little short on time, so we're going to do a lightning round of
All right.
questions
All right.
from the community. All right, another community question. If we're building a new app from ground up, is there a reason to use a mixture of NG modules and standalone, or should we just go fully standalone?
Standalone.
Standalone.
There's no
Standalone.
reason to do a mixture if you're starting new.
Fantastic. Next
NG
question.
new dash standalone.
There you go.
Standalone, that's right. Does Angular use WebAssembly to optimize how it works in the browser, or do we have plans to include it in the future?
Ooh.
We don't currently, but it is a topic we've been discussing a lot internally,
Yeah.
and it's something we plan to talk a lot more with the Chrome team as well. One of the good things is we get to talk with other teams at Google, and Chrome is definitely one of those. And so it is on our roadmap. We don't quite know how it's going to shake out yet.
And I want to save some of these questions for the future and do some like deeper dives and more interviews, because I think people have such fantastic questions for us. All right, let's do a couple more. Okay, so is there the possibility of compilation support? Oh, we did that one before. All right, if we're building a new app, we did that one. Let's see, is there any more? Do you suggest to name a component? All right, so this is the thing. Okay, I'm not going to give my opinion. I'll just tell you this. Do you suggest the name of a component like with card component or just card with the introduction of standalone components? Do we need to change our best name practices? The reason I said something is because we recently did a live stream, and I'd like to name my components like Mark component or door component. Jeremy likes door. So settle the debate. Is it door component or door?
I would do door CMP, so.
We have a third
I
contender.
abbreviated.
Okay. All right. So then it sounds like it's best left up to the development team.
It probably depends on what else you do. What do you do with your services? What do you do with your business logic? Where if is there other naming conventions you have that you want to fit in? So I would say the most important thing is make sure it fits in with the rest of what you have. And so if you generally end up designating things as components, or you end up having things in folders, whatever structure you might have for your the project you're working within, stick with that more than anything else.
Spoken
I like
a
that.
true
Be consistent.
architect. That's right. Architecture. One more. Let's do one more, and then we'll wrap up here. Do we have plans to add native store for state management in Angular? Something. Okay, I get it. Something like we have in NGRX. Do we have plans for something like that?
Ooh, that's
It's come up a lot.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think it remains to be seen.
Yeah.
So we're talking with a number of the community library stakeholders. So NGRX, NGXS, RX Angular, State Adapt, and we're engaging with them to figure out what are some good patterns around state management. Where I think we're not settled right now is like, where does this slider live between what the community supports and encourages in different patterns? So like NGRX works differently than NGXS. How much of that do we leave up to the community versus how much do we say, okay, everybody seems to be doing this one thing in a very similar way. It makes sense to put this part of the core framework.
Oh, good. Very good point.
I think the most important thing for us was, though, to make sure these work with signals and then see how things develop from there. But that interoperability layer was very critical for that as we introduce it.
See, fantastic. I think we have one more we want to go to. All right, so are there any plans to be able to render static pages at build time with lifecycle methods like Next.js to make SEO and social media link sharing easier for static portions of the sites without the need of SSR? That's a chunky question.
It's a chunky question. It's probably not been the area we focused on the most. Angular is at the heart of it a reactive framework, and we focused on making it easy to build reactive applications. That doesn't mean it's not something we shouldn't be considering more on whether or not we should be supporting more of that. It's just not on the most immediate part of our roadmap, given the fact that at the core of it, what we're trying to work on is reactive applications rather than static generation. But it's a good call out that it's a way that the web is changing, and so we should keep an eye on it.
Right. Fantastic. All right, friends. Well, here on the Angular team, we are extremely grateful for you folks out there being a part of our vibrant and thriving Angular community. A big thank you to Matt, Lina, Alex, the whole team who spent time hanging out with us today and just being here. Now, this stream is coming to an end, but this is not the end for you. Now, if you're new to Angular, we just launched a brand new course on the Angular YouTube channel that'll help you build your first Angular app, and we hope that you will enjoy it. Be sure to NG update to get the latest version of Angular for your next project. And from all of us here on the Angular team, thank you and go build great apps. We'll catch you in the next one. Hey there, friends. It's Mark from the Angular team back again and bringing you the latest updates from the Angular v16 launch. Angular's momentum is real, and we've been hard at work creating the best developer experience possible for you, the fantastic Angular community. We have a lot of features to discuss, so let's get to it. First up, I hope your components are thirsty because the team has just released a developer preview for non-destructive hydration with server-side rendering. That's right, long gone are the days of your Angular apps having to re-render the server-rendered DOM when your app gets to the browser. With this feature being in developer preview, you can try it right now. Here's how. For standalone apps, add a call to provide client hydration to the providers list in the Bootstrap application configuration. And if you are using ng modules, add a call to provide client hydration to the providers list in the app's main module. Remember, this is a developer preview and there will be some features we haven't implemented just yet. Be sure to check out the release notes and Angular release blog for more details. Links in the description of this video. Next, let's discuss recent updates to Angular's reactivity model. Up to this point, we've relied solely on change detection powered by Zone.js, but over time, we found that at scale, it isn't the optimal solution. Now, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out a better way, and you know what? We think we found one, Angular Signals. If you haven't heard of Signals before, that's totally fine, because we got you covered. Signals have three core concepts that we call reactive primitives: signal, computed, and effect. A signal is like a variable and holds a value that can change. Unlike variables, signals can notify Angular when they change. A computed is a kind of signal that calculates its value from other signals and only updates if the value it depends on change. Then we have effects. Effects are functions that execute when the values of the signals they use change. And this gives developers the opportunity to respond to changes in a meaningful way. And now, the biggest question, when can we use them? Right now. We just launched in developer preview, and we're going to link some helpful docs and Q&As with the developers where you can find more information. And remember, as with all developer previews, things are likely to change over time as we continue building out this feature set. Remember last year when we introduced standalone APIs for components, directives, and pipes, allowing developers to have optional modules and everybody loved it? Well, get ready to love it more because we're introducing some awesome upgrades. You may have wanted to migrate existing applications to use standalone APIs. Well, we've got something for that scenario. Say hello to the new standalone migration schematics. Now you can migrate your applications all at once or by path using the new schematic. To get started, run ng generate @angular/core:standalone in your project. But we didn't stop there. You can now generate applications that are configured to use standalone APIs from the start. That's right, no need to manually convert your app code to bootstrapping a component and removing modules. It's all handled for you with the new standalone command line option for ng-new. Routing is a vital part of nearly every app out there, so we've decided to make it a bit better for everyone. You've asked to be able to bind parameters to a component's inputs. All right, you got it. In v16, you can now define properties to map to inputs in the resolve configuration for your routes. You can pass resolver and data properties, path parameters, and even query parameters. Very cool stuff. Let's turn our attention to updates around developer tooling. We have a crisp new developer preview of our ESBuild-based build system. Furthermore, we're using Vite for the development server of ng-serve. Now, this is only for dev servers. To enable Vite in ESBuild, head over to angular.json to configure this feature. We'll include instructions in the description to this video. Surveys and community feedback tell us that Jest support is high on the wish list for Angular devs. Well, today we're happy to announce that we're enabling experimental support for Jest in v16. Details on how you can try out this new experimental feature can be found in the links in the description. Here's another feature that we've received a lot of requests for. The community has been asking for required inputs for a while, and we are happy to announce that components now support required inputs. To mark an input as required, add the required flag to the input decorators configuration, and you are ready to use this new feature. Okay, honestly, there are too many features to cover in just this update, so it's time for a lightning round. By default, new projects will start with fewer files, and we've added a schematic to generate your environments file if you need it. The Angular language service can now autocomplete imports in templates. The ng undestroy lifecycle hook is now injectable, and it provides you with more flexibility in registering cleanup logic for your app. And while Angular has always been compatible with the vast majority of content security policy settings, we've just added stricter style source CSP support across our packages to allow developers to specify a nonce attribute for component styles that Angular inline. And can you believe that there are even more updates in this release? To learn more, check out the official Angular release blog at goo.gle/Angular-v16. All right, everyone, Angular v16 is out now with some fantastic updates that we think you are really going to love. Be sure to ng update today to take advantage of all of these great features. Thanks for watching, and go build great apps.